Dear Jane, considering I am retroactively writing this letter, it is fitting that I write to you having shown that I am not the person I was when we knew each other. First of all, let me say congratulations on getting married. We both know that the Lord is pleased when two Christians come together and make families that are passionate about the Gospels. If there's anyone at school who deserves the honor of wife and mother, it was certainly you. But let's preface this letter with a recap of our friendship. When we met, you were dating Tanner, who I always thought was an odd choice for you. And I imagine you felt the same way when he drunk texted you one day. Over the spring and summer, we came closer, and all was good until homecoming came around, senior year. And you said you would be going with some dude you met at summer camp. I was admittedly jealous. But homecoming rolled around and you said that he ditched you on homecoming day, which I didn't believe, only because he lived across the state and you never told me how he planned to get here. Not too long after that, I devised a plan to make you jealous by telling you about some random girl I had a crush on. You responded by dating some guy I could tell you never cared about, which we argued about for weeks at a time without questioning why we were ever mad at each other. We would reconcile, talk, and something would happen at some point where one of us would get mad at the other. By the time prom rolled around, I remember being mad at you for some reason, and so to ultimately get back at you, I decided I would not take you to prom, even though things were headed that way. Not that we talked about going together, but it was obvious. However, because of the cycle of our friendship, to me this would be the final nail in the coffin, so to speak, where I would have the last laugh going into graduation. I asked Brianna to go to prom, and she said yes. And so you went with someone else, who I could tell you were trying to keep an enthusiastic attitude about going with. You put on a smile and went forward with your plan. One evening before prom, about a month or two before, I remember feeling an intense urge to send you a text confessing my feelings towards you. But two things kept me from doing so. The first reason was that I was mad at you. Secondly, every girl I told my feelings to usually friend-zoned me. So I opted not to tell you because I did not want to hear those words from you. And how I would regret that. I literally had the message typed out, ready to send with your name in the bar. And I closed the app and forced myself to sleep. When prom rolled around, you asked me to join my group, and I said sure. And all 8 of us went to prom together. And during one of the slow dances, I saw you briefly kissing your partner. I noticed he had made the first move, and I wasn't really even jealous. I was confused and neutral at this point, because I knew there was something else happening. But perhaps because I also knew this was how it was meant to be. 3 days later was our senior barbecue, and we spent all that time talking with each other. 300 people present, and you and I talked the whole time. By the end of it, we walked to my car, and you got in. And as our conversation came to its end, you left my car and left a letter in my glove box saying, "Do not read this until you get home." I didn't listen to you. In fact, as soon as you left, I started reading it. And little did I know this would be the last time I would ever see you. When I read it, it said, to conclude, "I wish we got to go to prom together, and I wish something happened between us." Years later, that still hurts. Because since then, I have come to like more girls than I care to admit, and to all of them, at the very least, I would admit what I felt. But you are still the one person to whom I didn't say anything to, and the one person to whom I should have. We are nearly 10 years later, and at the time of writing this letter, I am about 1 year into my radical conversion to Christianity. And now I understand why you had to be the one that got away. I noticed you are still involved in the organization Young Life, and as I recall, you were a pretty zealous Christian, at least by today's secular standard. And so I imagine you are going to be familiar with the story I am going to share from the book of Genesis, when Jacob wrestled with the unnamed man in chapter 32. Usually this chapter or section is titled Wrestling with God in most translations of scripture, and the story goes as follows. Jacob encounters someone at the end of the day after traveling with his family, and as he is alone, Jacob wrestles with someone until morning. And as God is losing, God says, "Let me go, for the day breaks." And Jacob says, "No, not until I receive a blessing." And so God responds, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have wrestled with God and with men, and have prevailed." I promise you this is going somewhere, but I imagine this is why you had to be the one that got away. Had I not refused to send you that text, we probably would have ended up together. And though you were a Christian, even if you had convinced me about all the weird Jesus stuff, it would have been half-hearted, and you would have been stuck with someone who was lukewarm about the faith for who knows how long. And I would have put up with your church stuff half-heartedly, mostly for you, and not for him. And that would have been heartbreaking for you. In a way, the Lord was protecting you from me, and me from you. God's grace, in cooperation of my divinely inspired supernatural ego, kept me from telling you how I felt. This was to ensure that at some point I would have to grapple with the realities of the spiritual world, and I did, for nearly 10 years. From New Ageism to Eastern religions to occultism to now the fullness of the Christian faith, I am as on fire for Jesus more than anything I have done since the day you left that letter. Providence is weird. And so I suppose all this is to say, since that day, I have been wrestling with God, and most of it was unknowingly. I can only imagine what you know, considering you have been wrestling with him knowingly your whole life. And in a way, the Lord needed me away from you so that I could love him first, rather than you, which is the natural order of proper love. Anyways, I wish you the best, and I look forward to your response. Your friend, Mark.